Good morning. So we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. And the question is, somewhere in my pocket, there it is. Since I have this, do I need this? Okay. Hopefully I won't accidentally turn it off. So, technology, isn't it wonderful? And I found something out that really helps because, see, it did it automatically. That's great. Now. No. Yep. So, it didn't quite do it right, but close enough. Now, as most of you know, I am a fan of Charlie Brown. Isn't it wonderful that technology gives us problems? Man, there's where it needs to be. And it did it automatically. That's great. That's what I was hoping for last week, but it didn't do it. But I found out a way to do it manually, but this time I didn't have to do it manually. It's great, wonderful. Everything's calm. Hopefully no more hiccups. So we're going to do things just a little bit different today. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you a series of pictures, kind of rapid fire. And I want you to think about these pictures. And note the first thing that comes to your mind and what these pictures might be about. We're going to go through them in rapid fire first, and then we'll go through them again a little bit slower. And if you want to jot down what comes to mind on each particular picture, that's fine, that's great. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the picture, so you might have to write and not look at what you're writing. So, that in mind, think about these pictures. As we go through this lesson, through this story, I want you to keep in mind the thoughts and these images, what you may have jotted down concerning them. And let's see what might be affirmed, what might have changed, or what might even be illuminated by the end of going through this story. Mark chapter 5, verses 25 through 34. We have a story within a story. Now a woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years had endured much under many doctors. She had spent everything she had and was not helped at all. On the contrary, she became worse. Having heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothing. For she said, "If I just touch his clothes, I'll be made well." Instantly her flow of blood ceased, and she sensed in her body that she was healed from her affliction. At once Jesus realized in himself that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing against you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he was looking around to see who had done this. The woman, with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. "Daughter," he said, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction." There's not a lot presented here about this woman. We can notice that we aren't even given this woman's name. All that is given about her identity is that she had some bleeding disorder for 12 years. Now, this is not something that happens normally or even abnormally from month to month. This is far greater than that. This is beyond that. She had spent everything she had trying to figure out what is wrong with my body. Spent all she had under the care of doctors, trying to figure this out. And with all this money, all these resources that she had, everything she had spent on doctors trying to find out what's going on, they didn't help her at all. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been sick? I don't know what's going on. Something's going on. I need to find out what it is. You go to the doctor. You explain to him what's going on. And say, "Well, okay, do this. And it doesn't help. "Well, doc, that didn't help. So, okay, well, we'll try this for a week or two or a month or 3 months, and nothing gets better." And sometimes, not only does it not get better, it gets worse. This is the exact opposite of why I came to the doctor. I came to the doctor to get well. And I'm only getting worse. Now, her issue was probably, most likely, an issue related to some dysfunction or disease of the bladder or kidneys or even the uterus or something. We can only speculate to the diagnosis. But regardless of whatever was wrong with this woman, it goes beyond a medical issue. This woman was unclean. Not just for a short time, periodically through her life from month to month. This woman was unclean and remained unclean for 12 years. Can you imagine? Just imagine in Jewish society being unclean for 12 years. It's kind of hard for us to imagine, but let's look at the Levitical record, the law concerning this. Leviticus 15:25 through 30. When a woman has a discharge of her blood for many days, though it is not the time of her menstruation, or if she has a discharge beyond her time, she will be unclean all the days of her unclean discharge, as she is during the days of her menstruation. Any bed she lies on during the days of her discharge will be like her bed during menstrual impurity. Any furniture she sits on will be unclean as in her menstrual period. Everyone, Everyone who touches them will be unclean. He must wash his clothes and bathe with water, and he will remain unclean until evening. When she is cured of her discharge, she is to count 7 days, and after that, she will be clean. On the 8th day, she must take 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest is to sacrifice one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for her before the Lord because of her unclean discharge. Imagine. Think of the grief. Think of the despair. Think of the hopelessness and everything else that this woman is going through and has been going through for 12 years to no avail. Every corner she turns to try to get better, she's met with defeat and has only got worse. It's hard for us to imagine the ordeal of this woman, the ramifications of her home life, her social life, and even her religious life. Anything she touches becomes unclean. Talk about having your own chair when company comes over. No, that's Daddy's chair. Can't sit there. This goes way beyond that. Because setting where this woman has sat, you become unclean. Then you have to wash. Everywhere she goes, everything she touches becomes do you understand the far-reaching ramifications of this ordeal? She can't even go to church. She cannot go to temple or even synagogue until she's clean. Now, just imagine, if you will, how many times as the days progressed, as she's counting, 1, 2, comes to 7. Goes and gets the turtle doves, only to fall short of being able to make that 8th day sacrifice. How many times in 12 years could she have possibly thought, I'm going to make it this time? And then awake in the middle of the night to find, nope. And it starts all over. And the thing about it is, we're not given a lot of details. That could have been the first 6 months of the ordeal. After that, she might not have skipped a day of abnormal issue of flow of blood for the rest of the 12 years. It's hard for us sometimes to put ourselves in that culture under those ramifications and situations that completely throw this woman's life into chaos. In the ancient world, medicine and magic were closely related in thought. Now, we can't say with any certainty, but seeing as this woman had spent everything she had on doctors and they hadn't helped her, It's possible she may have sought other means of help. It may be that she sought help from, quote, sorcerers. Down south we call them herbal quacks. There's one a few miles away from us that we call the voodoo doctor. Now, I don't think he practiced any sorcery or anything, but there's some very strange coincidences of people that I have talked to who went to him. So, giving how people do in situations like that, it's very possible that not only did she spend everything she had talking with doctors, she spent everything she had talking with anybody who might possibly give her some relief. Picked up that horn, 1-900 psychic reading or whatever. To no avail, only getting worse. When we take that possibility into consideration, it makes the relationship between faith and doubt even stronger. This woman had spent everything she owned to try to get better, talking with people. And she has now heard about Jesus. What made Jesus' story that she heard, his abilities, different? Now, there were people who practiced sorcery in medical healing and things of that nature. Remember, we said real medical practice and sorcery were closely related in thought. So what made Jesus any different? Why do I need to go see this new guy when all these other guys had to help me? There's something different about the stories of Jesus than any other healer, any other doctor. Evidently, the things she heard about him were greater than any mystical healing she may have heard of or maybe even encountered. In her despair, she was full of doubt. But she had enough faith to move her into action. She said, if I can just touch his clothes. You know what is so interesting beyond that? The way she came about touching his clothes. Notice, she came up behind him. Why? Well, she's unclean. She can't address him forward, face to face. She's got to do this in secrecy. The people around there knew about the woman for 12 years being unclean. Oh, don't go to that neighborhood. That unclean woman's down there. She might be out. You might accidentally brush against her and you'll be unclean. People around knew. She's got to kind of sneak up behind Jesus. And she don't have to get real close. I just need to get just close enough to touch the hem of his garment just a little bit. I'll be clean. Why didn't she come and ask for his help? Hearing the stories about Jesus, why didn't she come and ask him? She could have done it from afar. Lepers would have to cry out when they saw somebody, unclean, unclean. They've cried out to Jesus, heal me. Jairus had just come face to face with Jesus to ask him for healing for his daughter. Maybe she thought that Jesus, being called rabbi, a teacher, would scold her about violating the law, purity laws. or whatever the case may be, she displayed enough faith that moved her to the action of seeking Jesus and touching just the hem of his garment. At once, Jesus realized in himself that power had gone out from him. He turned around to the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" Jesus is en route to a home to heal a child. And on the way, people are pressing in against and all around Jesus. How significant it is here that this is pointed out. Jesus felt power leave his body. He felt power flow out of him and asked his disciples, "Who touched my clothes? Who touched me?" Somebody did it. But his disciples, ever quick to point out the obvious, Jesus, you see this crowd. You understand the environment we're in. Everybody's pressing around. Everybody's touching you, Jesus. How can you ask who's touching you? There's no way to tell who touched you. We are all touching you. Everyone was touching Jesus. Think about that. Everyone was touching Jesus. But not everyone was being healed. Now surely, in all of this crowd, surely there's more than just this woman that needs some healing. The sick flock to Jesus for healing. There's got to be several of them in this crowd. Yet, only when this woman touched the hem of Jesus' garment did power flow from him. Wow. So, everybody's touching Jesus. There's no way for us to know who did it. But he kept looking around. He wanted to know who that was that touched him. He was looking around to see who had done this. The woman, with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, she felt herself be cleansed. She came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Jesus was looking for the one who caused power to flow from him. Not to scold her. Not to tell her how wretched and dirty and unclean, how much of a sinner she was. He just wouldn't allow her to remain anonymous. He did call her out. Not to condemn her. Not for more proper teaching about purity laws and how you don't really need to not violate these. He called her out. Not because she owed him payment as you would pay a doctor. She's rendered payment to physicians enough. Jesus knew it. That's not why he called her out. The reason he called her out is because he could not allow her not to acknowledge what happened. Not to acknowledge him as the one who made her whole. And you might ask, well, what do you mean not acknowledge? She knew. That's why she went there. this is another proof of who Jesus is. Not just come from God, but God Himself. Everybody needed to know what happened. The same way, we must acknowledge Christ as the one who saves us. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through Him. He's the only one that saves. She came to Jesus with fear and trembling and told Him the whole truth. Perhaps she was afraid that He would reject her. How dare you, unclean woman, come and touch me? Now you have made me unclean. I got to stop everything I'm doing. I got to go wash and wait till sundown before I'm clean again to resume my ministry. Well, that wasn't it. Jesus was never afraid of becoming unclean. And furthermore, for that point, in all of Jesus' healings and dealings with uncleanness, He was never accused of being unclean. The Pharisees knew better than that one. We can't be sure exactly how much detail she told Jesus. But Mark says that she told Him the whole truth. So she at least told Him enough detail as to she's had this issue for 12 years. She spent everything she had on any type of healing, all kinds of doctors. They haven't helped her. She's only got worse. She told Jesus at least as much as Mark tells us. Possibly a little bit more detail. This woman has basically made herself destitute, seeking treatment and healing of this issue. Jesus tells her that she's healed. She's whole. Or, depending on your translation, she is saved. Daughter, your faith has saved you. Your faith has made you whole. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction. Jesus said that her faith had done this. Now, certainly, she didn't mean that she was saved by her own doing. Surely not. No. It was her faith in Jesus that moved her to action, that extended the grace from Jesus of this miraculous healing. And notice Jesus' response to her. He simply said, "Daughter, go in peace, be healed." He didn't say, "Go show yourself to the priest to be declared clean." He's done that before, but He doesn't do it here. He just tells her to go in peace and be healed. Jesus has never been afraid of touching unclean things. You know, in order to make things clean, you got to touch them when they're dirty. In order to get people into Christ, you have to touch them when they're outside of Christ. And whatever the case is, whatever's going on in our life, whether it's initially coming to Jesus or things that happen to us after we obey the gospel, we must have a faith that moves us beyond all fears and doubts to come to Christ, to come where He is, no matter what the consequences may be. Faith plus action is the avenue through which God empowers His people. This woman was both fearful and faithful. But her faith overcame her fear. And for that she was blessed. That doesn't say she had great faith. It just says, if I can touch just His clothes. It doesn't say anything about if I can only come to Him and start following Him and learn from Him and all that and do just what He says. It doesn't say I have to stand on the mountain and declare what He's done for me. Just a little bit of faith. Just enough faith to move you into action. Whatever our case, wherever we find ourselves, in grief, in despair, in hopelessness, in doubt, with all the if-onlys that we can conversation with ourselves. When all that's said and done, or before, in the midst of it, let us muster that mountain-moving mustard seed faith and couple that with the courage enough to take the leap of faith into action. And the thing about leaps of faith, especially when it comes to God and Jesus and following His Word, it's not a blind leap of faith into the dark. It is a leap of faith into the light. If we can do that, when we do that, as we do that, mountains will be moved. Look at the mountain in this woman's life that was moved. All because she had just enough faith in Jesus to just get close enough to touch His garment. That mountain-moving faith that spurs you into action grows as you keep acting. It feeds your faith. That mustard seed, the smallest of all, grows to one of the greatest trees there is. Just enough faith to move you to action. Time and again, grows to a great, flourishing faith. If we can just muster the strength and courage to put it into action. And it's not grand, great actions either. Small actions. Probably one of the greatest amounts of courage we need is engaging the conversation about Christ. So as we go through life, let us muster the faith, have the courage to put the Word out there. In living, in practice, in word, in deed, in all that we do. If you are subject to the invitation in any way, we ask that you come as together we stand and sing.